Hello and welcome to the Ruth MacFit podcast, where we chat all things health, fitness, nutrition, and how to build habits that actually work with your life. Now, if you're enjoying these episodes, then it really helps if you like and you subscribe. And I absolutely love hearing from you. So please do leave a comment, maybe a 5-star review, and let me know what has resonated with. Right, let's get into today's episode. Hello, welcome. Very happy to be here. As always, I have been on a podcast with Andy today. It's been very lovely, but also the weather outside is feeling very January. Is that a word? Where it's windy, it's rainy. And actually, this is sort of what I want to talk to you about today, because you know that feeling at the start of the year where you genuinely feel like a different person. You're motivated, you've got a clear head, you feel ready. So you set the goal. You're going to move more. You're going to eat better. You might even think, right, this is the year that I really am going to commit. It's going to work this year. And then for a week or two, it does. And then something happens. A workout doesn't happen. The weather turns a bit shitty. You're tired. Life kicks back in. And suddenly it feels like you've just fucked up. And what most people do next is make it mean something about them. Maybe it's that they're inconsistent, that they always do this, that they just can't stick to anything. And I want you to hear something. Nothing has gone wrong. Nothing terrible's happened. I know this because I've done this too. Years ago, I would start the year by cutting things out, maybe cutting out snacks or chocolate. I did once cut out all carbs in the sense that I decided I was going to go paleo, so remove an entire food group, which on the surface of it sounded disciplined, right? But what it actually was just one more source of stress layered onto an already very busy life. I had toddlers at the time and I was running. Who would think that cutting out carbs and running was a good combination? I didn't know better then. I know better now, thankfully. It really just was one more rule, one more thing to get wrong, one more way of telling myself that I was failing when things didn't go to plan. And this is something I see again and again in January. Not just that people cut something out, it's what they're adding in with everything else. Perhaps they're adding in longer walks, 4 or 5 workouts a week, tracking food, eating perfectly, a certain number of steps, all at the same time with no plan for what happens when conditions are not ideal, which I think we can agree happens often at this stage of life. I had a message on Instagram from a lovely lady who had set herself a running goal in January, which is a totally reasonable goal, but it hasn't been going as well because of the weather. We had all that cold weather, the ice, the snow, there'd been rain, it's dark mornings, dark evenings as well. And I thought it was worth just pausing at this point because January always has barriers. It's cold, it's dark, it has bad weather, we've got lower energy, less daylight. And if our goal relies on the conditions being perfect, then it is understandable that things are going to start to wobble. And if you know that you hate running in the rain or you don't feel safe going out at night, or perhaps icy pavements are going to make you nervous, as they should, they would me too, then setting a goal that depends on those things not happening is likely going to set you up for some struggle. That doesn't mean it was a bad goal. It just means that it needed a touch more flexibility, a backup plan, or a different version of what success might look like. Because when those barriers do show up, and they are always going to, the problem definitely isn't you. The problem is just the approach. So in this episode, I want to help you understand why motivation feels so strong at the beginning, why it fades, and how to build goals that survive the test of real life rather than collapsing the moment that things get hard. You are not wrong for feeling motivated at the beginning of the year. There's a very good reason for this. January does feel different because of something called the fresh start effect. It's this idea that certain moments in time help us mentally draw a line to who we were before and who we want to be next. So that could be New Year, a Monday, a birthday, especially if it's like a milestone birthday. They give us this feeling of, right, this is a new me, it's a new chapter. And this motivation is real. It's very helpful. It can genuinely help us get started. You hear all the time about how New Year's resolutions don't work. They're likely to fail. And this might encourage you not to set them. But there are people that set a goal at the beginning of January and they stick to it. It does work. It really is going to be about the approach. The problem isn't going to be January, and it isn't motivation. It's what we pile on top of ourselves when that motivation is high. Because there is another side of January that we've briefly mentioned. It is dark. The weather can often be grim. Christmas is over. Money can feel tighter because we spent a lot in December. And also we got paid earlier in December a lot of the time. And people are already tired before they've even begun. You've probably heard of the term Blue Monday. I mentioned it on my stories recently, but it's something people are throwing around a lot at the moment. This is the thinking that the third Monday in January is supposed to be the most depressing day of the year. This phrase actually came from a PR campaign to sell holidays, Sky Holidays, I think it was. It's not a scientific thing, but it does sort of stick for a reason because January can feel hard. What often happens is that we use the fresh start energy to design a plan that only works if conditions are ideal, whether that's the perfect time, perfect weather, perfect energy, perfect motivation. And when January does a January thing, as it's always going to, the plan starts to fall apart. And this is where I want to introduce something to you that can change everything. Sometimes we call them non-negotiables, sometimes we call them minimums. And this is going to be the version of your goal that you can still do on a busy, tired, hormonal, messy day. Not the dream version, but the version that's quite likely when we're in this midlife 40 plus sort of era. This is the one that is going to stop you from doing nothing. And it's one of the reasons I have so many different workouts in the app, because when we're lacking motivation and we don't want to do a longer workout or that style of workout, we want to be able to have the flexibility to do something else. And I had a message from a member that I think summed this up perfectly. I popped in a few more timed workouts in the app because a couple of people had requested them. And she left a comment where she said that she'd become a big fan of these timed workouts. She said she used to associate them with Joe Wicks and think they weren't really for her. But what she then went on to say is that her brain feels full all the time: dates, deadlines, kids, admin, life. And when your brain already feels like it's overflowing, having to count reps, remember what set you're on, decide whether it's 10 or 12, just adds to that mental load and that decision fatigue. She does her workouts in the morning before she's made any other decisions, and she pointed that out. But she realized that the timed workouts remove the pressure. The timer tells her when to work, the timer tells her when to rest, the timer tells her when she's done. She said that she used to think that she needed to work out longer and harder. But actually, having a timer means that she's faffing less between the sets. She works hard for the 40 seconds and bish, bash, bosh, she gets it done. And she did mention how if she feels like she needs a bit more rest, then she can pause the timer and rest for longer. And the other thing that she mentioned is that it might not feel as progressive as counting every rep, but she uses heavy dumbbells. She's being more consistent because of liking this format more. And she gets that moment where the timer tells her, well done, you've done this, bing. And this is the point. Some days sets and reps will feel great. Other days they might feel a bit overwhelming. So instead of forcing the same approach every day, she's changed the format to match what feels good for her right now, because it's always easier if you feel good doing it. And it's not lowering the standards. It's having an understanding of yourself. I did the same thing a while back with running. A couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago, I was struggling with it. I hadn't run in a little while. I felt like I couldn't run, but it was more about the pressure I was putting on myself. I was only counting a run if it was at least 5K, if I completely tracked it on my watch and I watched my pace throughout. And I was judging the session by the time I got, and if it felt hard or slow, or if I had to stop, then it felt like a failure. A big change happened when I realized that a run could just be a mile long, that I could walk if I needed to, that I didn't always have to track it, that some days, especially when my mind is really busy, I don't even turn my watch on and look at my watch. I go by how I feel, and my intention is always to come back feeling better than I did when I went out. I genuinely think that choosing that little mile loop at the beginning was what built that habit again. If every moment of my run is feeling hard and I need to walk, then I can walk and it still counts. It's my minimum. It removes that pressure, but it keeps me moving forward and it keeps the habit going. And this applies everywhere. If you have a step goal, you might want to ideally reach 10,000 a day. That's your aim. but your minimum might be just above what you were doing before. And with workouts, you might want to do 3 gym sessions a week, but your minimum might be 2 gym sessions or a gym session and a home workout. With food, you might want to track everything, but your minimum might be focusing on your meals and aiming for protein and some fiber in each. You're still striving for the highest version when you can. You're just not completely giving up when you can't. And this matters because guilt and shame are usually what make people quit. We pile pressure onto ourselves. Life gets busy, something slips, and then we think, what's the point? But pressure is not going to create consistency. It's going to give you something else that makes consistency harder. Pressure is going to create stress. And when motivation fades, which it does, it's not going to be willpower that keeps you going. It's having a plan that still works on the hard days. So when people do quit, this is usually how it sounds. I was doing really well, but then, and insert a life thing here, work got busy, the weather was awful, someone got ill, sleep went out the window, motivation dipped. And then very quickly, the story becomes, I just don't think I've got the willpower. This always happens. I'm not cut out for this. I'll start again on Monday. Now, I want to be very clear with something here. I am not against starting again as soon as you can. If you can get back into the routine and doing what you're doing, great, please do that. But when I'll start again on Monday comes with no opportunity to reflect and see what wasn't working, there is a chance that all you're going to be doing is repeating that same cycle of starting again on Monday, because it's incredibly unlikely that the real problem is just a lack of motivation or willpower. What I do see over and over again is that we try and change too much too soon, or we expect too much of ourselves in a life that is already very, very full and very busy. The thing that got in the way didn't come out of nowhere normally. They're normally part of our lives. And if they keep happening, then the plan needs to change, not you. A big part of this is perfectionism and the all or nothing thinking. And I often hear you say to me, I think I've got this all or nothing thinking. But that thinking doesn't normally show up when someone is focusing on just one or two small things. It shows up when they've layered everything on top of something else: the workouts, the steps, the water, the tracking, the sleep, the movement, all the things that start to feel like a list you're constantly failing at. Just one more thing that you have to do, or you feel like you have to do. And then when one of those things doesn't quite line up, or when your sleep is poor or energy is low, the brain goes, well, what is the point now? And that is when people stop altogether, not because they don't care, but because they're overwhelmed. This is where I want to tell you about a member called Caroline. You see, for years, Caroline felt guilty if she couldn't fit in a full hour workout. So if she didn't have the time or the energy to do it properly, she'd often do nothing at all. It was never about laziness. It was just about feeling like anything less just wasn't enough. What's the point? And just after New Year, we were on a call and she said something that has really stuck with me. She said that this was the first year that she hadn't gone looking for a January challenge. She hadn't tried to get her friends or her colleagues involved in one either. Not because she'd given up, but because she felt good. She had balance. She had something that was fitting with her life. And she didn't feel like she needed to blow everything up and start again just because it was January. And I want to say something else here because it's very important. When we're looking on social media, when we're looking at what other people are doing, we're constantly being shown what an ideal day looks like, that optimal day. And I think we can start to believe that this is what is needed to make progress, that we need to be doing this all the time. But those optimal days aren't happening every day for anyone. I know that I'm not optimal all the time, and I don't want to be. I want to allow space for that pleasure as well, for flexibility, to live my life, because progress doesn't come from doing everything perfectly. It comes from doing a bit more than you were doing before consistently. And for me, I know that if the majority of my food and my movement is optimal, and then I'm having those other things in there as well, but it's just a small amount, then it's fine. And if you have quit those goals that you set yourself in January, then I think now is a perfect opportunity to reflect, to understand what didn't work, to notice a pattern, because if it keeps happening, it's not that there's this personal flaw. It's a sign that you need a different approach. And I promise you this, you are capable of far more than you think, but it has to work with your life and not against it. And often the biggest shift isn't doing more, it's putting things in place that make it easier. So if you have quit or you feel like you're hanging on by a thread, this is the part I really, really want you to hear. You do not need to start again. You do not need a new challenge. You don't need to wipe the slate clean, and you definitely don't need to feel guilty or punish yourself. What really is going to help is a little bit of reflection, a bit of curiosity with no judgment or beating yourself up. Because the moment that things started to go hard isn't random, it's where there's information and we can learn from that. And this is where belief is going to come in, not the motivational quote kind of belief, the practical kind. There's good evidence that our belief in ourselves, what psychologists call self-efficacy, is built through experience, not through hype, not through forcing ourselves to do more. We believe we're capable because we've done things before, because we've followed through, because we've kept small promises to ourselves. Every time that you say you'll do something and you actually do it, you are strengthening that belief. You're proving something to yourself. And every time a plan collapses under the pressure, that belief is going to take a knock. So if your goals keep falling apart, it isn't that you lack belief, it's that the plan hasn't given you enough chances to succeed. And that is why reflection is going to matter so much. This is exactly why I use some reflection prompts. I've got a little guide for my members called SRS reflection prompts. Here are just a few examples of some of the prompts I use, and it will depend on what resonates most with you and how you're feeling. And I'm just going to list a couple of my favorites. What might have made this harder to do today? What's one small thing I can do to help myself right now? What would make tomorrow feel a little easier? What advice would I give to a friend in this situation? Where are my expectations realistic today? Am I being kind to myself or self-critical? What would not doing it look like? What's one small thing that I'm proud of today? What would good enough look like today? And there's others as well. They're not about fixing yourself or analysing everything you've done wrong. They're for those SOS moments when you're feeling a bit stuck or overwhelmed or close to giving up. They help you pause, reflect, and respond differently instead of quitting. It might be that you just ask yourself, what was I trying to do? And where did it start to feel hard? Was it the amount, the timing, the format, or the pressure I was putting on myself? And here's one to definitely ask yourself, but it's one that people often just skip. And that's, what did I manage, even when the days were messy? Because we often skip that too quickly. We go straight to the what went wrong and we miss what was working. And once we start to notice that, we can reset without feeling like we're starting over, not by doing more, but by making things easier. What would be a realistic minimum right now? What could I commit to even on a busy and tired day? What would reduce that decision fatigue rather than adding to it? How can I show myself a little self-care and make myself feel calmer? Because when we reflect like this, something very important actually happens. We stop seeing quitting as failure and start seeing it as feedback. And honestly, that changes everything. You'll hear me say it again and again. There is no failure, only feedback. Belief isn't rebuilt by these grand restarts. It's rebuilt by consistency that you can actually sustain, by staying in the game, by adjusting instead of giving up. And so if January hasn't gone how you had hoped, it doesn't mean that your year is off track. It means you've learned something early on. This can be a positive thing because learning early gives you the chance to build a way forward that is going to work with your life quietly, steadily, in a sustainable way, and with far more confidence than you think. So if there's one thing I want you to take from this episode, it's this. You haven't failed. If you've paused or you've struggled or you stopped, it doesn't mean that you can't do this. It means that the plan didn't quite fit the life that you're having right now. That's not something to judge yourself on. It's something to work with. You do not need to wait for Monday. You don't need to start again. You don't need to be more disciplined and just try harder. You just need to decide what you can do today that is going to keep you moving forward. Something small, something realistic, something that feels doable, even if the day doesn't go to plan. Because progress doesn't come from perfect weeks. It comes from staying connected to your goal when things are harder. If you want a place to start, I'd really encourage you just to spend a few minutes on reflecting rather than resetting. And if you're listening and you're thinking, I just don't want to keep doing it this way anymore, then know that that means you're not meant to. Support matters, having options matters, and having a plan that adapts with your life matters. But for now, know this: change doesn't have to feel hard to be effective. Consistency doesn't have to be perfect to count, and you are far more capable than you think. Take care of yourself, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. Now, if you've enjoyed this episode, do make sure that you're following or that you've subscribed so you don't miss out on the next one. And if you want some support putting this into practice, then come and join us inside the No Crap Cake method. This is where we focus on building strength, confidence, and consistency in a way that feels good and that fits with your life. All the links for this will be in the show notes. But until next time, goodbye.